Hey, we got a cool show coming up
Yeah.
here.
Let's
And
see what you're like as an analyst, because I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, and I really want to go in depth with some of these guys. So don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to sort of. I mean, I'm not. I was getting some from a couple of different athletes, fans, because I was being really kind of direct with my predictions, not saying, oh, I think he
yeah,
could do well. I was going, okay, I've got him fifth, I've got him sixth, I've got him seventh. So sometimes you just got to get yourself in the line of fire. And like I said, it's a subjective sport at the end of the day, and it adds speculation. So I think this is why these
yeah,
things are always fun to do. And I love doing them.
yeah. I mean, boy, it's hard to critique your friends, and like that's the weird. Like,
Yeah.
like I know a lot of these guys now, so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
some shitty amateur. I was just talking shit before. It's like no one cares what I have to say, but now I have to like go and see these guys backstage. Like, why'd you say that about me?
Do
But
they?
I when I offer predictions and analysis, if you want to call it that, like
Yeah.
I'm very diplomatic. So
Okay. Well, I won't be.
all you guys,
Cool. Right. So, I mean, where do we start? Because like personally, I think it's a four-man race. What's your feeling? Let's go straight into who you think really, because there's like, I mean, I had Milos on last week, and he said there's seven guys here that can win it.
seven.
Yeah,
Whoa.
that was my response as well. I think there's
Okay.
four. What's your feeling?
I agree. Four. We probably have the same four. Nick,
Nope.
Samson, Derek, Hottie. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay, that was easy.
No. No,
Um,
I'm different.
I. Oh, what? Okay.
I don't
Excuse me.
have Nick
Go
in my
ahead.
top four.
Oh, you don't. Okay. Who's in there?
Is it Hadi, Derek, Samson, and hang on, Hadi, Derek, Samson, and Brandon.
Andrew?
Brandon.
Brandon.
Yeah, I
Oh
think
yeah.
I think
Okay.
Brandon's going to hold into that top four.
He looks good right now. People always fucking forget about him, because he's
Yep.
like he doesn't do a show all year, and then oh yeah, he won an Mr. Olympia. We all remember like a week before the show. I have him in the top five. I think he could be in like the fourth or fifth position.
Yeah.
But because like he's kind of like he's either flatter and harder or fuller and freaky and
Mm.
a little softer. I think the flatter and harder thing kind of lent like I prefer that on him
Yeah.
because like he's always got the bubbliness. He's always freaky and round, right?
Hmm.
Even if he's a little bit lighter and flatter. But the same thing is true with Samson. Actually, if he doesn't have those dug out glutes and hams, which I have never seen on Samson, hamstrings yes, but glutes like no. That hardness from behind, like it kind of takes you out of the conversation a little bit in the Olympia because like that level of conditioning is just crazy, especially with Hottie, Nick, and Derek. Two of those guys are coached by Hani.
Yep.
They
Yeah.
don't
Yeah. Yeah.
miss.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's hard to go up against. But I mean, at the same time, I wonder what to think. That's my preference as far as judging goes. But like, they gave Samson the Arnold. He was very impressive in many ways, but he lost from the back. He arguably lost from the side, and he was significantly softer. But he had that shape and overall structure that they wanted to reward. So in years past, they might not have done that, but maybe if they're pushing in a more aesthetic, streamlined. Not to say that he's streamlined and small or anything, because he's like almost 300 pounds. But
Yeah.
if they're trying to push the judging in that direction, then that could work in both Brandon and Samson's favor. Obviously against Nick, even though he's made so many improvements in that department. But yeah, it's the judging has been I won't say inconsistent, but like some of the picks at the shows earlier this year were like, okay, that's kind of what you'd expect. This is the most complete conditioned muscular guy. And then other shows like they kind of went towards a more aesthetic kind of look. Like Justin won New York, right? Because he had some very freaky, or excuse me, not New York,
Tonio.
Chicago. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, Tonio won New York.
Yeah.
I had 30 pounds on him, literally. And like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
still gave it to him. And I see why they did.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And then Justin won in Chicago. Again, not the biggest muscularity wise and conditioning wise. He got beat by John De La Rosa, but he was, he just had these freaky poses, the little waist, the big arms. And people like that, so he's going to the Olympia. Um, I it's kind of hard to tell. It's like trying to read the star signs as to what Steve's gonna want to see.
I personally, I think there's, I mean, this is probably whether I'm right in saying this, but I feel like whoever the head judges at the show is who finally decides who wins. So if that head judge particularly likes that style of physique, or he likes, like, say you might get one head judge that likes Nick Walker, he wants freaky size, freaky condition, or they like someone with like a Samson that's not as hard, not as big in terms of like density and kind of size, but physically big, but they just like his shape. I feel like it's the head judges. It depends on what head judges at which show. Personally,
they're deciding who goes in the middle.
Yes,
and that's how all of the rest of the judges are going to look at that. They're moving people around and calling the shots. And I mean, these guys are all talking and chatting between prejudging and finals when they have lunch together. They're not talking about the baseball game. They're talking about bodybuilding because that's what they have all in common, right? So,
but one thing I'd like to ask you. Sorry to interrupt. I was talking to Ron Harris about this, and I said, do you think conditioning isn't as much of a factor as it was, say, in the 90s or in the early 2000s? Because Hadi and Derek weren't 100% bang on. I mean, in fact, that's probably the worst condition we've ever seen Hadi in at the Olympia, and he won. Like, from the back, I felt there was no separation in his shoulders. His readable bicep was quite soft, but everywhere else he was thick and chunky. Yeah. And I've noticed, like Brandon was fourth. He was only slipped to fourth, and his condition was kind of way off, really. But he looked fantastic. But I feel like, like you said, in some shows they're going for, say, a Charles Griffin who just brings absolute dry, shredded condition. Like Tonio, like 30 pounds lighter, but arguably better condition. And what's your feelings on that?
I think much more so than in years past. I don't want to compare it to the 90s necessarily, because like that's 25, 30 years ago, and like so much has changed in that time frame. I mean, the guys nowadays are literally all like 20 pounds heavier than the guys back then, except for like Dorian, Ronnie, the real big guys, right?
Yeah.
Just the size thing it's way bigger now, and you don't even get looked at unless you have like something crazy like Tonio bubbly muscles or something like that. But yeah, I think I mean, if you look at the feedback from the fans in some of these comment section, and I know that opinions are like assholes, everyone has one, but it like they are fans of like the really aesthetic physiques that are still super muscular. So think Samson, right? And Samson, I mean, he still had not the same level of muscularity, but he had those impressive lines with a similar level of conditioning a few years ago, and he was in second callouts. And now I think it requires a shift in the judging criteria for a guy like that. Obviously, he's way bigger too, which is a huge factor, but it requires a shift in the judging criteria for him to like bump up to like be in the conversation for a win at the Olympia. That's huge. Going from second call out to like first call at the O in a couple of years. So yeah, I think they're putting a bit less of an emphasis on it because sometimes you get physiques winning shows based on the balance of all the categories that are some people might call ugly. Because he's the most conditioned, complete, muscular, but he's got a wide waist. So are you going to ignore those first three things and just, reward the prettier looking guy because he's got a smaller waist? I mean, years past, they didn't do that. I think they'd give it a little more to the, the more complete muscular guy, but now it's like, if you're trying to sell this, especially in the shadow of like classic, where all those guys are very pretty looking, it's like to avoid some of the criticism perhaps of saying like, oh, open bodybuilding is just gross, everyone's got a gut and they don't look good, and a lot of the guys from the 90s like to throw that out there, and it's disappointing to hear that, but it's I think things have shifted, because I saw people win shows this year that I did not expect.